I didn't notice him at first. Most people wouldn't have. He wasn't doing anything strange. He wasn't staring. He wasn't following me. At least not obviously. He was just there, everywhere. I first saw him at the grocery store. Nothing memorable. Middle-aged guy, baseball cap, gray jacket, shopping cart. Normal. A few days later, I saw him again. Different store, different part of town, same guy. I only recognized him because of the jacket. It was unusual. Dark gray with a faded orange logo on the chest. The kind of thing that sticks in your memory. I remember thinking, weird coincidence. Then I forgot about it. A week later, I stopped for gas before work. While filling up, I looked across the station. There he was. Same jacket, same cap, same expression. Not looking at me, not interacting with me, just standing beside a pump. That was the first time it felt strange. I mentioned it to a coworker later. He laughed, said I was probably seeing different people. Honestly, he was probably right, or so I thought. Then things started adding up. I saw him at the pharmacy, the fast food drive-thru, the bank, the hardware store. Not every day, not every week, but enough that I began noticing. The weirdest part? He never acknowledged me, not once. No eye contact, no conversation, nothing. It was like we occupied the same spaces without ever interacting. Eventually I started joking about it. Whenever I saw him, I'd text my brother, the jacket guy is back. He became sort of an inside joke until one Saturday morning. I was helping my mother clean out her garage. While carrying boxes to the driveway, I glanced down the street and I saw him, standing beside a parked car, less than 50 yards away. That stopped me cold, because my mother lives nearly an hour away from me. Different city, different county, different everything. The odds suddenly felt impossible. For the first time, he looked my direction. Not directly at me, just toward the house. Then he got into the car and drove away. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't want to sound paranoid, but something about it bothered me for days. After that, I started paying closer attention, really paying attention. And once I did, I noticed him more. Not because he appeared more often, because I was looking. One evening, I left work and spotted him sitting in a diner. Another time, I passed him in a parking lot. Then I saw him exiting a movie theater that I've never been to before. The pattern made no sense. Our lives shouldn't have crossed that often, yet they did. Then came the photograph. It happened by accident. I was scrolling through pictures on my phone after a family barbecue, mostly shots of food and relatives, nothing important. Then I noticed someone in the background, near a row of parked cars. The gray jacket, the baseball cap, the same man. My stomach tightened, because I never saw him there that day, not once. Yet somehow he'd ended up in one of those photos. This was the moment I stopped treating it as a joke. A few days later, I searched social media. I posted the photo privately and asked friends if anyone recognized him. Nobody did. Then my brother called. He sounded uncomfortable. He said, "Now don't freak out. That's never a good start." Apparently, he'd recognized the car. Not the man, the car. The dark blue sedan. My brother worked at a body shop. Several months earlier, that exact car had been towed in after sitting abandoned near a highway. The strange part? According to police paperwork, the registered owner had been dead for nearly 2 years. That got my attention, fast. I contacted the local police department. Not because I thought a crime had occurred, because I wanted an explanation. Maybe there was one. There wasn't. At least not a satisfying one. An officer reviewed everything. The photo, the car information, my story. Then he asked something unexpected. He asked how many times I'd actually seen the man. I started counting, then stopped. Because I wasn't sure. Maybe 10 times, maybe 20, maybe more. The officer nodded slowly, then asked, "And every time you saw him, were you alone?" I thought about it. Gas station, hardware store, pharmacy, parking lots. Every single time, except one, my mother's house. That realization hit me immediately. Nobody else had ever seen him. Not coworkers, not friends, not family, only me. The officer didn't say much after that, just suggested I stop looking for him. That advice sounded ridiculous until 3 months passed, and I never saw him again. Not once. No grocery stores, no gas stations, no parking lots, nothing. The sightings stopped as suddenly as they started. Life returned to normal. Then last year I was helping my brother move. We were carrying furniture into his new house when he handed me an old framed photograph he'd found in a thrift store. The picture showed a town festival from sometime in the 1980s. Dozens of people filled the frame. Children, families, vendors. And standing near the edge of the crowd was a man wearing a baseball cap, gray jacket, orange logo on the chest. Exactly the same. Not older, not younger. Exactly the same. My brother laughed when he saw my face. He thought I was joking when I asked where he got the picture. I wasn't, because I spent years convincing myself there had to be an explanation. A coincidence, mistaken identity, anything. But the one thing that still bothers me, the photograph was dated 1987, and the man standing in it looked exactly like the person I've been seeing 35 years later. Same jacket, same face, same expression, just standing there, like he was waiting for me to notice him. I didn't believe my friend when he first told me about the house. Honestly, I thought he was screwing with me. By the time police got involved, neither of us were laughing anymore. And to this day, I still avoid that road whenever I'm nearby. This happened about 8 years ago. My friend Tyler and I worked together at a shipping warehouse. We were both in our 20s, both bored most of the time, the kind of guys who would drive around back roads at night just to kill time. One Friday evening, Tyler asked me a strange question. He said, "Have you ever noticed the house on Oak Ridge?" I told him no. Oak Ridge Road wasn't far from town, mostly woods, a few farms, nothing special. Tyler explained he's been taking a shortcut home after work, and every night he'd pass the same house. Small white farmhouse, long gravel driveway, single porch light. Normal, except for one thing. Nobody seemed to know who lived there. At first that sounded ridiculous. There are plenty of houses nobody pays attention to. But Tyler insisted something felt off. The place never changed. Same vehicle, same porch light, same curtains, every day, for nearly a year. Eventually curiosity got the better of us. The following weekend we drove out there. The house existed exactly where Tyler said. White siding, wraparound porch, detached garage. Perfectly normal. The only unusual thing was how isolated it felt. The nearest neighboring house sat nearly half a mile away. We parked on the shoulder and looked for a few minutes. Nothing happened. No movement, no people, no vehicles. Just silence. Eventually we left. That should have been the end of it. Instead, it became a habit. Every few weeks we drive past. The house always looked exactly the same. Not similar, the same. Same truck parked beside the garage, same porch light, same curtains. Months passed. Then one night we noticed something new. A woman standing on the porch. Just standing there, motionless, watching the road as we drove by. Tyler slowed down. The woman didn't move, didn't wave, didn't react. She just watched. The image stuck with me. Something about her felt wrong. Not supernatural, not creepy, just unnatural. Like someone posing as a person. A few weeks later, we drove by again. She was there. Same position, same posture, same porch. At nearly the same time of night. That bothered us enough to turn around. For the first time, we pulled into the driveway. Slowly, carefully. The woman didn't move. As we got closer, my stomach dropped. It wasn't a woman. It was a mannequin, dressed in real clothing, standing on the porch, facing the road. We laughed immediately. Relief more than anything. Mystery solved. Or we thought. Then Tyler pointed toward the window. Someone inside moved. Fast. Gone before either of us got a... Gone before either of us got a good look. We left immediately. Neither of us wanted to explain why we'd been sitting in someone's driveway. Months passed. Then Tyler stopped taking Oak Ridge Road altogether. When I asked why, he seemed embarrassed. Eventually, he admitted something. He started seeing lights inside the house. Not unusual lights, flashlights, multiple flashlights, moving room to room after midnight, sometimes for hours. He convinced himself it was hunters, or a large family, or anything else, until one night he saw 3 people carrying something into the garage, something wrapped in a tarp. After that, he quit using the road. I probably would have forgotten the entire thing. Then police blocked Oak Ridge Road for the following spring. Several patrol cars, state police, crime scene units. The whole area shut down. News crews arrived later that afternoon. That's when we learned what happened. The house wasn't occupied, at least not legally. According to investigators, the property owner had died years earlier. The home should have been vacant. Instead, it had become a meeting place. A group of people had been using it for months, possibly years. Not living there, using it. The details never became fully public. What investigators did reveal was disturbing enough. The mannequins. There wasn't just one. There were dozens, positioned throughout the property, near windows, on porches, inside rooms. From a distance, they made the house appear occupied, alive, normal. Enough to discourage attention. Enough to convince passing drivers someone lived there. Investigators eventually arrested several people connected to the property. Most charges involved stolen goods and illegal activity being stored there, but one detail never appeared in the news. I only learned it because Tyler's cousin worked with one of the deputies. Apparently, investigators found thousands of photographs. Not of the house, of cars. Cars driving past the house. License plates, drivers, passengers. Years worth, including ours. Multiple photos of our truck, taken on different dates, different reasons, different years. Some close enough to show our faces. That realization hit harder than anything else. Because while Tyler and I thought we were the only ones watching the house, someone inside had been watching us too, for much longer. The road reopened months later. The house was eventually demolished. Today there's nothing there except an overgrown field. Most people have forgotten it existed. But every now and then, when I'm driving through unfamiliar back roads, I think about those photographs, about how many times we'd slow down, about how many times we stared at that house, how many times I've wondered who was inside. And I remember the part that still bothers me most. The mannequins weren't there to scare people away. They were there to make sure people kept looking. The first thing I noticed was the flower pot. It had been moved, not far, maybe 6 inches. Most people would have ignored it. I almost did. But that flower pot was where I kept my spare key, and I hadn't touched it in months. I lived alone at the time. Small 2-bedroom house, quiet neighborhood, nothing unusual. The kind of place where you could leave your garage door open for an hour and nobody would think twice about it. I'd been there about 3 years. Never had any problems, never had anything stolen, never felt unsafe. The spare key had been in the same spot since the day I moved in, under a heavy ceramic flower pot beside the front porch. Not exactly genius level security, but it was mostly for emergencies. I'd only used it twice. One Saturday morning I walked outside to grab the newspaper. That's when I noticed the pot looked slightly crooked, not dramatically, just enough that my brain registered it. At first I assumed the landscapers bumped it, or maybe an animal. Nothing worth worrying about. Then I lifted it, and the key was gone. I stood there staring for several seconds, confused more than scared. I checked around the porch. Nothing. Maybe it fell. Maybe I misplaced it. Maybe I forgot where I moved it. Except I hadn't. I searched the entire area. No key. Eventually I convinced myself people must have found it somehow. Kids, contractors, who knows? I replaced the locks that afternoon. Problem solved, or so I thought. About 2 weeks later, I came home from work and found my television on. That got my attention immediately, because I was obsessive about turning things off before leaving. The TV wasn't loud, just running, a news channel playing quietly. I checked the house. Nothing appeared missing, nothing damaged, no signs of forced entry. I figured maybe I'd forgotten. Not impossible. People make mistakes. Still, it bothered me. A few days later, I found the bathroom light on, then the kitchen radio, then a ceiling fan. Always small things, always explainable, but eventually a pattern emerged. The changes only happened on days I worked late, days I wasn't home until after dark. That realization sat in the back of my mind for weeks. Then one night I walked into my bedroom and froze. The closet door was open. I never leave it open, ever. Not halfway, not cracked, not slightly. Open. The room suddenly felt different, smaller somehow. I checked the closet. Nothing. I checked under the bed. Nothing. I checked every room. Again, nothing. That night I barely slept. The next morning I bought cameras. Not expensive ones, just enough to cover the front door and living room. For nearly a month, they recorded absolutely nothing. Then one Tuesday afternoon, I got an alert while sitting at work. Motion detected. I opened the app immediately. The front door had opened. My stomach dropped. I zoomed in, waited to see a burglar, a delivery driver, anybody. Instead, I saw a man calmly walk inside using a key. Not kicking the door, not forcing it. Using a key. My old key. I called the police while watching the live feed. The man moved through the house like he belonged there. He opened cabinets, sat on the couch, looked through drawers. Then something happened that terrified me. He walked directly toward the camera. For a moment, his face filled the screen. Not masked, not hiding. Then he unplugged it. The feed died. Police arrived before I did. They searched the house. The man was gone, but he hadn't taken anything. Nothing. Not electronics, not cash, not jewelry, nothing. Instead, they found evidence he'd been entering for months. Food wrappers, empty water bottles, a blanket hidden in the attic crawl space. He wasn't stealing, he was just staying. Only while I was gone. Investigators eventually identified him, a former handyman who worked on the property years before I bought it. Somehow he'd retained a copy of an old key. When the spare key disappeared from under the flower pot, police believed he took it after seeing me use it one day. What bothered investigators wasn't that he had entered. It was how comfortable he'd become. According to evidence found later, he knew my work schedule, my days off, what room I slept in, when I typically arrived home. The detective handling the case told me something I'll never forget. He said, "Most burglars want your stuff." Then he paused. "This guy wanted your house." I sold the place 6 months later. People always ask if I regret that decision. I don't. Because every now and then I still think about those weeks. The television turning on, the lights, the fan, the closet door. Little signs someone had been there. Not trying to scare me, not trying to rob me, just getting comfortable. And sometimes I wonder how many things I blame on myself that were actually him. Because the scariest part wasn't finding out someone had entered my house. It was realizing he'd been living around my schedule long before I noticed anything was wrong.